What's up, bros? Welcome to another Brograph tutorial. I'm Dave Koss, and today we're going to be building a barrel in Cinema 4D, and we're going to texture it in Octane. So if you don't have Octane, don't worry. We're not going to use any of that until the end, but at least you'll learn how to make a barrel and maybe learn something about Octane if you don't have it. I haven't really rehearsed this per se. I've built something similar recently, and so I'm just going to kind of get right into it, and hopefully everything works out. So if I run into any roadblocks or anything, just bear with me, and we'll work on this together. So here in Cinema, I've got a cube, and that's what I'm going to start out with. Now, typically, I don't know, let's say a barrel is, I don't know, 4 feet tall. I like working in inches, so you know, you might be working in a different format or something if you're overseas or whatever, but we'll do it this way. So 96 inches tall is what we want to make this. I like to start out by actually just making 96 all the way around, and I can kind of get a feel for what I'm going to do here. So I've got it about as tall as I want it. I'm just gonna kind of eye it right now and just see, like, what do I want a barrel to look like. And a lot of times when I do this, I'll actually do something like open up a web browser and look for a picture of a barrel. So I'm gonna do that. Barrel. I got these different barrels. Now, I prefer the barrel that's kind of tall as opposed to the one that looks kind of fat. Like you can see this one here. That's okay. I'd like to do something more like this one right here, actually. So I'm going to bring that up. It's kind of a small image, unfortunately, but I'm going to drag it over here and save it, just so I have something to kind of reference every once in a while. This is kind of like what my workflow is when I'm building something like this. Just looking a lot at Google Images, that's just stuff. So I'll close that down here. And that looks about right. So that's gonna be just my reference as to what size I want. Now, I'm not going to use this cube for anything. I'm actually going to make a new cube, and I'm going to start building the slats that go in here. And just for now, I'm going to turn off this reference. And now the size of my reference cube in Y was 96. That's how tall it is. I'm going to do that here. Make it 96 tall. So this is going to be one of the planks. And then I'm going to take the thickness of it and make it, I don't know, maybe 1 inch, I guess. So that's not bad. Now, honestly, theoretically, you should be doing this the other way. Z, I've got it about 20 inches. I'm going to do X is 20 inches and Z is 1 inch. That's really how you want to do it. You want your axes to line up like this. And I think the plank is a little too wide. I'm going to do half that. I'm going to do 10. So this is my plank. Now, when you have a plank in something like this, it's never going to be a perfectly straight edge. So I'm going to put fillet edges, and that's way too much. I'll do my radius at like 0.2. I like to keep them pretty low, and usually about 3 subdivisions. I think that's not quite enough here, though. Maybe 0.05 actually. So you can see I've got rounded edges going here. And I'm going to use a cloner object and make a circle out of this. So I'm going to do cloner. I'm going to put my plank in here. Make sure you label everything. This is the plank. Here is my cloner object. And right now, by default, it's set to linear, so it's moving up like that. I don't want that. I'm going to do radial, but not that plane. I'm going to do XZ plane. So we got this radial thing going on. Now, I'm going to turn back on my original cube as kind of my size reference. And this is where I'm going to set the radius of this circle of planks, just to kind of get it how I want it. So that's good. I'll turn off my reference. Now I'll bring the count up until they're barely touching each other. Now this could get a little touchy here. See, 21 is too much, but 20 isn't quite enough, because when your barrels are, your barrels are going to be airtight, basically, in real life anyway. So I'm just going to take down that radius. You can hold down the Option key. I forget what it is on Windows, but you can do minute adjustments with these little ticks on here. I'm going to bring it down just until it's sealed. Now, you might have some collisions going on in the inside right here, but you're not going to see that in the end, and that's okay. What we really want is just a slight seam right here in between each one of these. So that's looking pretty good. It's pretty good, I guess. So, I would like to save that because saving is good. Barrel underscore 0001. So I like to do all my file names, because when you save incremental, it'll just change that little number right there for you, and you're good to go. All right, so now that that's saved, I'm going to go to my deformers, and I'm going to select something that will bend these out, because for me, it's actually easier to build this as a cylinder than to have to build the real geometry curved. It actually works out a lot better this way. So you have a bunch of options here. I'm going to use the bulge, and we're just going to bulge outward. So first thing that I'm going to do is, if I can do this, no, I can't do it that way. There's this little fit to parent deal here, and usually you can do that on a regular object, but that's not really the case here. If this isn't perfect, it's not the end of the world. So I am just going to get it close. See here on the top view, I just made them the same. And then as far as how tall this is, I'll just make it that 96 that we did earlier. And you can see here that we have our bulge. If I turn up the strength, we can get the bulge where we want it. It might be a little too fat, but we'll see. I'm going to null this cloner, put it in a null. That's Option G. That puts everything you have selected into a null object. And I'm going to call this barrel, B-R-R-E-L. And then, I guess I'll name the cloner that too. I'm going to put the bulge in with the barrel right here inside of this master null. Now, if you notice, nothing is going on. Why is that? Well, our plank is only one segment by one segment by one segment. If I turn on lines, so you can see here, there are no segments going on with this barrel. So if I start adding segments, I start to see a good looking barrel. Now I want to have not too many segments. Now keep in mind, I'm working for efficiency here. If I bring up my render view here, I want to make sure that this doesn't necessarily look bad when it renders, because I won't be able to change the segments later, and you'll find out more about that later on. But I want enough segments so that it looks smooth, especially if I'm going to go up close to it. Real quick, on the Octane side here, and you can do this with a regular sky as well, but on the Octane sky, I'm going to add an HDRI environment. And then you can do this in Octane and in Cinema 4D. You can go to your content browser here and search for HDR. I'm going to use HDR 9. It's my favorite for modeling, and I'll show you why in a second. But I'm going to put that on my sky in Octane. so that I can see what I'm doing. Now, let's get back to non-Octane stuff here. We've got the barrel with the plank that has all these different segments. So if I have, say, 3 segments, this thing is going to look pretty ugly. Not like a barrel. Now, if I do 4, 5, 6, it's getting there, but let's look up close at what's going to go on when we hit render. It's going to be fairly segmented. You get these straight lines, and it doesn't look like a piece of wood that's well rounded. So I'm going to jack this up to like 20, and I think that'll be enough for what we want to do right now. I'm looking at it, it looks pretty smooth. All right, so let me close that. And there we have it. Now we want to do some other elements here. We've got our picture of our barrel that I'll bring back up here. If I can open this back up. And what else do we want to put in here? We want to put these rings and maybe some rivets or something on it. I like to put more rivets. I like to put rivets all the way around and make it look like each one of these is riveted in place into each plank individually. So let's start working on that. And I want to put a top and bottom on this barrel. That will be relatively simple because it's just a cylinder, right? And what is the radius of our barrel right now? It's 31.583. If I do that on here for the cylinder, there we go. We're fairly close. Now there is some bend going on, so we want to look and see. You know, you've got little crevices in here because there's the deformation going on, and so it kind of changes the radius a little bit. So I just butted it right up against it, but then I like to leave the little lip here on top because that's going to look nice in the end. So we have that, and then I like to use instancing a lot. Of course, I guess we should set a height. Let's just set like a 1-inch height on this on the cylinder so you can see here what it looks like. All right, there we go. So there's my lip. I'll put it right there where that segment is. Now, Octane, you use instances and use render instances a lot because it's very helpful in the long run, and each little piece actually helps your render go faster. So I'm going to use a render instance. I have a nice little toolbar laid out here to do this kind of thing. If you can't find a tool you're looking for, of course, you can always hit Shift-C, type in what you want. Instance, there it is. So you'll see me use some of these extra tools up here that I've just kind of thrown in here because I use them a lot. But this is instance. The instance of this will go down here at the bottom. Pretty simple. There we go. Now we want to create the rings that go around it, the metal rings. So I'm going to take a tube, and I remember we had like a radius of 30 something from earlier. I'm just going to paste it in there, and I want the outer part of my tube to be on the outside of this. Now, keep in mind that this tube right now is not inside of our barrel, so we're not going to get the deformation that we want. I'm going to keep this bulge here as one element within barrel, and then everything else is going to be a separate null like this. So I've got the barrel and anything we create under here, and I've got this bulge separate, and then they're under the master null of barrel. What we have to do with our tube, of course, just like before, we got to change the height segments because, see, now they're getting a bend to them, right? And the cool part about this is that anywhere we move it, it's going to follow that deformation. Now, if we turn this off, we can see what we're doing here. We could actually work this way. I'll take this tube. I want, I don't know, about, I don't want the metal to be too thick, but I want to be able to have I want to be able to have it go around and have like an inner piece as well. That's just slightly smaller. So see, we get that lip right there. That's nice. But I want this inner piece to actually be touching as much as possible the other planks. And then we'll bring the outer in. There we go. Pretty good. And then the height of this, let's say 2 inches and see what that looks like. It's actually kind of small. Let's actually go with 4. Oops. 4. There we go. We turn on our barrel again. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong thing. Turn on our bulge again. You can see what's going on. Now, here's the segmenting that's going on here. This is going to look all jaggedy unless we up the segments, the rotation segments. There we go. It's going to look a lot better, a lot smoother. And anywhere we take this tube, it's going to conform perfectly. Because if we have the bulge off, you can see that's just going up and down. And same thing here. Everything works together. This is why it's so much easier to do it this way than to make the actual geometry. So I'm going to do one at the top, one at the bottom, and one in the middle. And I don't know, the middle one might be kind of offset, because what I'd like to do is put a logo on the barrel, because that would be cool. So on this metal, we also want to have fillet. I like to put even a slight fillet on everything, because nothing is perfectly straight in real life. It's always going to have a little bit of a bevel on it. So segments, I'm going to do 3 as usual, and I'm going to keep this really small, like 0.02 probably. So we have this really, really fine bevel going around, and that's going to make a big difference when you get to texturing, especially if you're doing close-ups of things. So there we go. Now, to keep my polygon count down and to keep my render time down, I'm going to do instancing for this as well. So I'll create an instance of the tube. I'm going to null those together. This is going to be called rings, I guess. So there's 2 of them in there. This one's going to go on the bottom. Just going to move it right down, nice and simple. And then, oh no, I don't want one in the middle, because that's going to screw up where I put my logo. So I might put it like, I don't know, slightly off center. We'll see if that looks good or not. I don't know. We might change that later. All right, so now we want to put the rivets in. And here is how we do that. I'm going to start out by creating the rivet itself, and there's different ways we can go about that. I prefer using a basic sphere, and I'm going to make it really small, like 0.1. That might be too small. I don't know. Let's check it out. Oh, it's way too small. Let's make it 0.5. That might be good. We might even go with 1. Yeah, that's good. All right, so this is going to be the rivet. And I really don't need that many segments in this, because it's going to be very small. So I'm going to start with 12, and we'll see how that looks. We might up it later if it doesn't look quite right. And this will be fairly simple. I'm going to take the cloner object that we did before for the barrel, for all these planks going around. And I'm going to copy and paste it. And I'm going to delete the plank, and then I'm going to put it in sphere. Now, if I turn off my bulge, and we're just working right here with the basics, you can see what's going on. I'm going to move this up. So it is very similar to what we have going on with the planks. In fact, it matches perfectly, except you can't see them because it is matched up perfectly. We want the radius to come out a little bit so that we can see them poking out. Now that actually might be too big, so I'm going to say that I want the radius of these to be 0.5. Of course, that's going to make them smaller. We'll have to bring the radius out a little bit more, but I like that. I think that feels good. It might be sticking out a little too much. I'm going to bring them back in 1. Now, Honestly, I'd like to see 2 of these per, and that'll be simple to do. All I've got to do is I'm just going to duplicate and just rotate it. And now I can take these 2, actually want them further apart. So I'm going to take the second one, rotate it a little more, rotate them both together. And I like how that is right there. And everything matches because you're using that basic Brograph cloner that you used for the beginning. So everything matches perfectly. Now, when you turn on your bulge, of course, they're going to disappear. You got to take these. I'm going to null those and call that rivet. Actually, rivets. But once I put it down here into my rings, they'll pop right back out where they belong. Now, the other thing that I would like to do is have all of these rivets be cloned as well. So I'm taking these rivets and I want to combine them with the tube from before around here into one. So I'm going to select them both. I'm going to null those. And then I'm just going to call this ring. So my ring has rivets in it. Now notice that they didn't duplicate down here. The reason is because these instances are set to the tube themselves and not to the overall ring that basically combines all of this together. So if I click on both of these instances and I drag the ring down in here into the reference object, then that works. And the nice thing about doing this is if you want to make a change, it works all the way across the board. If I don't like the spacing of my rivets, I can just go here and change it, and they change everywhere. So that right there is a barrel. Nice and simple. And now, if you would like to continue on and learn more about Octane, you can. If not, you've got a barrel. You could throw some wood texture on that, throw some metal texture on everything else, and it'll be looking pretty. But if you'd like to learn about Octane, we'll continue on here. So to start off in Octane, I'm going to open my live viewer window, and usually I keep this on the other screen, but I don't have a good way to record both screens, and not sure really how I want to manage that yet. So I'm going to have to move this window around quite a bit, unfortunately. But it's really nice to have this open even while you're modeling because you can really see what you're doing. So as we talked about earlier, just in case you skipped ahead just to the Octane part, I did a sky, I did an HDRI environment right here, and it added this sky. And in this tag, under image texture, you can put any HDR you want. I used HDR009, which you can find here in the content browser in Cinema by typing HDR and doing a search. It'll come up. Now, this is my favorite for doing modeling, especially if I'm doing like reflections and refractions and stuff like that, because what happens is you have this environment where it's kind of blank on one side right here, but if I move around here, you've got stuff that reflects. So it's an easy way to kind of look at like less reflection and refraction here, more reflection and refraction over here. It's just a nice generic setup, and so I've been using this a lot. It's really not even that high res of an HDR photo, but you know, here we go. The first thing that I would like to do to texture this barrel is get the wood texture that I want to use. And Octane has their live database. I'll open this live database here of textures. And if I click on wood, which it's already open, I have quite a few options. And there's one that is perfect for this because it has these planks. It's called wood planks. So I'm going to click on it and click download. And it's downloaded here to my materials. Now there's a couple things you got to keep in mind. You want all these planks to look different, right? So the way that you do that is by putting the texture kind of with cylinder projection onto all of these planks. But right now we can't do that. The reason is because the barrel is set up as a cloner object. And there's some other things we're going to have to do later, like if we put a logo on it, where we really just want this to be all one nice piece of geometry. So usually what I like to do if I'm at a point like this is save my project. So this version is saved, and then I'll save incremental. That way, anything I do where I'm doing destructive editing, I can always go back and pull that original geometry if I screw something up. So the reason earlier, like I was saying, you do not want render instances on is because they will not convert to down to geometry correctly. Now, when I'm working like this with simple stuff, I like to go to options and check geometry. I like to have automatic geometry enabled because I can see stuff in real time. And if you don't have that enabled, if you don't have automatic enabled, you won't see it on the fly. If you have a geometry tag on what you're doing, you'll see it as long as check geometry is enabled. Automatic mode is something that is new in RC2. This is technically, I think, like an alpha or maybe a beta version of this. It's not an official release, but it is extremely stable, and I've been using it for months. So let me show you what happens if I have render instances on and I mix down this geometry to just editable geometry, which is the C key. I'm going to get these planks as instances themselves, all instancing the original. I do not want that. I want all these to be geometry. So if I hit undo and I go back and I turned off render instances, now I'm going to hit C again, and now I will have actual geometry for each one of these pieces. That's really what I want. The other thing is these are still all separate pieces, so I'm going to select them all. Go up to objects, I'm going to say connect objects and delete. Now I have one nice piece of geometry. Hello? Where'd you go? Why didn't that work? Possibly I have to hit C again because I want to actually make geometry out of each one of those. I don't want them to be primitive objects. Now if I connect and delete, there we go. So now this is ready to go, except there's one problem. See this over here? Why is my my pivot point over here? Well, you would think, well, that's not a big deal because your pivot point of your barrel and your null is in the center, and that's fine. Here's what's going to happen, though. If I click on the plank and I go into texture mode here, and I put my texture onto the plank, I'm going to use cylinder mapping. Now look what happens. My cylinder mapping is off because that's where that center point is. So the thing that we have to keep in mind, let me undo back here, so we want that center point. I'm just going to include the null for barrel here when I do my connect objects and delete, because when I do that and then I put my texture on and then I changed it to cylinder mapping, it's going to map correctly. It's perfectly around the barrel. Now, when you're doing these tags, there's some things that you need to keep in mind. You don't want to change the tag itself much. You want to change all of your mapping and your alignments and your rotations and all of that stuff within the textures themselves. That's what's different about Octane. So you're usually going to have UVW mapping, 100% length, U and V, same offset is 0%. None of this changes. The only thing I'm changing right now is my cylinder projection, and I don't necessarily even have to do that in this tag. I could keep that as UVW and change my projection within the texture itself. So here is how you do that. I've got all my different layers set up, diffuse, specular, bump, and all that have come in from this texture I downloaded off the internet. But we're making some changes, and we don't want to see these weird anomalies going on while we're changing the alignment of one thing and then not the other. We're just going to get it where we want it in the diffuse channel, and at the end we're going to line up all the other layers that line up with it. And it'll make sense once I do it. You'll see what happens. So in the diffuse channel, they've got a color correction. Keep in mind when you're doing these textures and you do like an Octane material and you're loading a JPEG or a Photoshop file, this little button that you usually use here to bring in some sort of picture, you do not want to use that button. You want to go into Cinema 4D Octane Textures, Image Texture, click on the image texture, and then you load up your file. It's very important that you do it that way. I know that Octane will interpret the picture and it will look like it's in there correctly, but that's not what you want to do. You don't want to bring in bitmaps that way. So you can see here, diffuse channel, they have a color correction, so we have to go a couple layers deep to get to the actual wood texture that they have here. But once we're here, we can start looking at this and aligning it. So I'm going to turn on my render engine here, and we can see what's going on. These are not aligned correctly. They need to be rotated. So you can see here, we can rotate this 90 degrees, and I get my rotation. Then I can change my scale here and make it whatever size I want. And what I am doing is trying to get these to actually align the best that I can with the planks that I've created, because that's going to be nice and easy in the long run. So I'm basically going on my Y scale here and my X here. The reason that I have to do that is because I have this rotation going on, so everything is slightly off. So I'm changing the scale a little bit on X, making my adjustment on X over here. Okay, see, it's too small, so I got to bring up this Y. I know that's confusing, but it's that rotation that's causing your axes to be off. So this is going to be kind of a guess and check type situation, which, you know, happens sometimes. Needs to be a little bit smaller. And I think I'm pretty much lined up. It's not perfect, but that's pretty much going to work for what we're going to do. There's another method that you could do. But for now, I don't know if it's worth getting into, which would be to assign selection tags to each one of these planks individually, and then you could actually adjust the individual tags. You would basically take this piece of wood, you would make like 10 to 20 tags, however many planks you had in each one. You would slightly, actually in the tag and not on the material, change your offset on you so that each one had a different piece of the wood showing and they wouldn't look the same. But for this purpose, this is going to do the trick for what we want to do. Okay, so that's lined up for the most part. It's not perfect, but for this case, it's going to do the trick. You can go in and tweak it as much as you want. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a metal texture on the metal pieces themselves, and the way that I'm going to do that is by doing a new Octane material, and this is going to be called metal. And I'm going to put that onto the tube that we used for the metal ring. And I'm going to start to adjust it here. Now under basic tab, we've got diffuse, and we want it to be glossy. So we want this to be shiny looking. You can see it's kind of showing up here on the side. We're going to do a couple things to make this look like metal. The first thing is we're going to give it a dark color, like super dark, almost a brownish, but pretty much black. It's way down here. If it makes it easier, you can click and you can use this color picker right here. But that's kind of our darkish. I'm going to give it a little bit of blue. So we got our shine. I like the shine. Now in your specular, that's a little too much there. I don't like that. I'm going to bring that down. Seeing a little bit too much. And in roughness, we're going to blur it up. That's where you blur it up. Blur that up. Now what happens a lot of times is when you use your roughness and you do your blur, you realize that your specular is now too low because you brought it down. So I'm going to bring it back up a little bit, and there we go. We're getting those nice reflections in there. The other thing is that on our index, we're at a 1.3. Now if you bring your index all the way up, you're going to get that metal texture. If it's at 1, that's perfect mirror. If it's anywhere above 1, even 1.0001, it's going to start at nothing and go up from there. And this is kind of like a blend when you think about it. Where 1 is you don't see any diffuse color at all. Well, when you're on 8, you still see it. So anything in between 1.0001 and 8, that's where you're going to want it for this. I want to bring a little bit of that mirrored look. So I'm in the 2 point something range here. Now it's still too smooth. So I'm going to go into my bump and I'm going to do a noise. So I'm going to go to Cinema 4D Octane Image Texture. I'm going to load this up. I'm sorry, what am I doing? It's not an image. I'm going to go to Cinema 4D Octane and I'm going to go to noise. That's what I want. And I like the default Perlin, I guess that's how you pronounce it. And usually you got to bring your octaves up, but you really got to bring up your omega to get that fineness in there. I want to get that fine bump going. And what's interesting about this is, of course, that it's gonna be super stretched, and that's just because of the projection itself. You can change that in UVW transform. You know, you could bring this in on the scale X so that it looks correct. However, in this case, it actually works because we're creating kind of a, I don't know, anisotropic looking metal texture. So if you up your octaves and you up your omega, it actually has kind of that straight brushed look because it is stretched across. Now that we're at this point and we've set this, we can control how much of that bump is in here by using this gamma. Now, I want to have it in there, you know, pretty prominent so we can see it. But what's happening as well is that in our index, we're getting a little too much reflection now. So we got to back that off a little bit. And in the roughness, we might actually adjust that. If you put it down at 0, you can see, you know, your roughness is something that once you add a lot of bump kind of tends to disappear. Because even if you have 0 roughness, like no blur, you're still getting a blur kind of that is created by the bump. So I'm not going to use as much roughness as I originally thought. The other thing is that you can adjust specular at this point if you feel it's a little too much. You could even change specular color depending on what kind of metal you're using. So now from a distance, you really can't see that brushed look. You can see it up close. And now this is going to be kind of one of those things where you have to make a decision. Are you doing a shot of a barrel that's super close up? Are you doing a shot that's far away? Because if you're doing something far away and you want it to look more prominent, you might want to go back to your bump itself, and you might want to up the gammas so that they show up a little bit more. And you might want to actually make them thicker so that from a long distance away, it really looks like it still has that brushed look. It's kind of trickery that you're doing for the sake of your shot. If I change my, I guess my Y scale here, yeah, it's my Y, and then work on my stretch, it's a little more prominent from far away. Hopefully you can see that in the translation here, but I'm going to go to my index and actually bring down, and my roughness, I may stick with a 0 roughness because of this particular angle. But what happens is on your sides, you can see that really picks up. If you're going to get up close, you can see what's going on there. And you know, it's just your preference. It's what you want this metal to look like, and it's your application, and it's about how far or close you're going to be. So if I'm creating this barrel from a long way away, and my wood texture is way off right now, I can see that right there, and it works better for my long shot of the barrel. Now, I want to do the rivets, and I want them to look similar, so I'm just going to copy and paste this metal, and I'm going to put them onto these spheres that are my rivets. Now, if I'm going to get super close on the rivets themselves, I may want to up the segments. If I'm going to get this close, that's obviously not round. I'm going to change my segments here, bring it up to something looks a little more smooth, like 24. Now, my rivets themselves, I'm actually going to take off the bump map because I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to make it look a little bit flat. If I take off the bump and I go to my roughness and I jack that way up, and then I go to my specular and I'm going to bring that down. Now they look a little more flat. They're a little too reflective still. I'm going to bring down my index. I want these to kind of look like they're not a matte finish, but close. And then on my diffuse, I'm actually going to up the color of them so that they're a little bit more gray. So I'm going to say like 0.04 on the color, so that they look different. They look like there's something different than the metal. They were the rivets that were pounded into the ring separately, and they were made from different metals. So that now you can see, especially right here, they reflect differently, and their color is a little bit different. So they just, you know, stick out a little more, and that helps. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to put a logo on the barrel. So I'm going to go into Photoshop and I'm going to do a new texture. I generally like to stick with 2000 by 2000 for something I'm going to use pretty close. If I'm going to get super close, I change it to about 3000 by 3000. I like to use 300 DPI. And I'm going to save this, and this is going to be called Textures folder. I'm going to call this logo. Photoshop file. I actually want a transparent background, so I'm going to ditch this background here. And I'm going to write something on it. Brograph. Now you can pick whatever you want for this, and the color in this particular case doesn't matter. And I'll show you why. I'm going to do like bro and graph kind of on a different line. Now we're going to use this as an alpha for us to build kind of a separate paint texture. If you want to do this as an image, you have to go about it a different way. And I'll show both ways how you can do that here. So we'll start with the alpha version of this. So I've saved this Photoshop file that says Brograph, and I'm going to create a Cinema 4D Octane material, and this is going to be the color of that text. Right now I'm going to start with something crazy like blue, because if I do this, it's going to be really easy for me to see. And I'm just going to do that. That's all I'm going to do with this texture right now. And I'm going to do another texture that is a mixed material. And this mixed material is where I'm going to put my base layer, which is the wood. And I'm going to put the text layer, which is that blue that we just made. Now right now it's got a float on it, which is 0 to 1, kind of a gray value, which is like a mix basically between these two materials. We don't want that. We want that alpha channel to be the distinction between these two layers. So if you click on texture, this will change to a float texture, and you will change that to an image texture. And then this is where you'll load up that texture. So if I go to my textures folder and I load up the logo and I hit open, I'm going to put that on the barrel. Now, I've already set this tag here for the wood, and I have it exactly how I want it. And so all I have to do is take this mix texture and drag it in here to replace. And now you can see the first thing that happens is this is backwards. My alpha has not been selected. It's actually just using color itself to create its own alpha. We don't want that. We want to go to type down here and click alpha. It's going to pull the alpha channel out of there. Now if we look in Octane, the reason that we replace this texture instead of just dragging that material tag on there by itself, just manually, is because it's already set where it needs to be. If I were to take, let's say, this texture and I put it on here just out the box, it's going to do that. It's not going to be aligned, and all our stuff is going to be back to where it was. That's why you have to do a replace and drag it in there. Now here's what's cool about this in Octane is that everything has its UV transform within the material. So I can go into here and change where that alpha channel is pretty easy. But you notice that I have two of them, and that's because this is set to wrap around. I need to go to black color, and that's going to make it only appear the one time. Usually, like in Cinema 4D, you would turn off tiling. You don't want to do that here. You want to do all of your tiling and not tiling within the material itself. So there you go. And it's creating that alpha. Now, if I want to change it, I can go to that base texture and I can just change the color. Super simple. I can make it look like whatever I want. Now what is not happening here is you're not getting a good mix. Like it's not looking, of course, besides it not being aligned, which hopefully you can do a better job than me at that. I'm actually going to move my alpha so we can see it better, and it's more aligned on this side. I'm going to move my X value for Brograph until I can see it on the back side here. Okay, and I'm going to say that's where I want my logo to be, is on the back side, because I can see it better. It's kind of brighter over here in my HDR map, and I'm going to show you how to mix it so it looks like it's more of a part of the barrel, like it was painted on. So first thing we need to do is go back into the wood texture, and we need to fix all those other elements that we turned off earlier. And the way that we do that is by going to basic, and we're going to check all this stuff back on here, all the way down. And you can see the original is here not lining up correctly. So to fix that, we're going to go back to the texture where we made all those adjustments and got it how we wanted it, and select all of these through this area. I'm clicking and holding shift, so we're getting these rotation, scale, and translation values, and we're going to apply it to the other channels here, like specular. I'm going to go in here and just hit paste. I'm going to go to roughness, go to the texture itself, paste. It's putting it right in there, lining it right up, and the bump, of course. And you'll see these lines right here, they're going to go away, everything will be fixed, and everything's lined up. There we go. So if you want the bump and everything from the wood in the background to come through and look more like paint, here's what you have to do. You take your wood that you've set, you got everything how you want it, and you duplicate it. You copy and paste, or you hold down command and just drag and you do duplication. Now if you go to your Octane mix material, which I'm going to label mix here, right now you have that Octane white that we had here, or it was blue earlier. You're going to change that. You're going to put this new wood texture there instead on top. And when we re-render, you see nothing. Why is that? Well, because it's the same texture on top of itself with an alpha channel, so you're not going to see anything. But if we go to the diffuse channel and we clear it, So we're starting from scratch. Now you can see we got white. But all of the other channels that we have, the specular and the bump and the roughness, that is all now coming through here. So now it really looks like you actually painted that on there. And to top it all off, we need to put wood texture on top of the barrel, which I like to do a different wood texture. So I'm going to go into my live database and I'm going to find something else that I'd like to use. I'm going to pick this one at the bottom, the wood pine something or other, and download it. Now, I really like it, except it's not the right color. That's not what I want. So I'm going to put that on here. Fire my render back up. And then I'm going to make the adjustment. So I'm going to go into the base texture. You can see it brought in 3 different textures and did like a mixed texture here. I'm going to go into the diffuse. And really, I'm just going to up the gamma. You can also change the power. Like if I take it all the way down, you can see what goes down there. But I still don't really like that. I think what I would like to do is make it real dark. So I'm going to undo, get my power and gamma back. I'm going to do a color correction. And the way you do that is when you've got your image texture here, you go to Cinema 4D Octane. I'm going to do color correct, and it adds that texture that you already had, your image texture, into this color correct automatically. So now you can do stuff like change brightness, hue, saturation, and all of that. So see, now I can change the gammas, change the saturation, hue, can make it a different color. But I still don't like that. I still don't feel like I'm getting the control that I want. I want to get like more of a brown texture. So if I undo back, I'm going to try this instead. I'm going to do a multiply, and it will put that texture as one layer in there for you. And then I'm going to do an RGB spectrum multiplied on top of it. So now I can go in and I can select a color. So that is how you do that. Now, if you would like to put a colored logo of some sort on here, you have to kind of go about that a different way. I'll show you how to do that too. We'll go back into that wood material we have that's white right now, and we'll just do an image texture. Click on that. Now, in my Photoshop file, if I want to apply some sort of color to this or image or whatever, I can. So for now, I mean, this could be an image with an alpha, but for now, just to show you how this works, I'm just going to apply a color in certain areas so that you can see how this works. I'm just going to take a paintbrush. I need a bigger brush than that. And I'm going to make some color in here. So you can imagine that this is an image or something, and I'm going to... So this is an, I don't know, your logo or something, and these are your different colors, and it's really, really pretty, isn't it? But it's an image instead of using an alpha. So this will, I'll save that, and this will go on top. I'm going to go into my image texture, and I'm going to load that same logo. And what do you notice? You notice that it's off. Now, why is that? The reason is because when you did your original alpha channel, you moved it around to the back side. And so you have to make that same adjustment on this texture. So you go into that alpha that you created for your wood, which is your mixed material. That alpha right there, you copy these sections here, the rotation, the scale, the translation, and then when you go to your logo over here, you can do a UV transform and you can paste them in there. And that moves all those coordinates to where we move that alpha channel to the back side of the barrel. And now you have the same thing. You've got the bump mapping and stuff going on, and all the other stuff's coming through. It looks like it's painted onto the barrel itself. And that is that. I hope you enjoyed this. This is kind of a first go at some Octane stuff. I'm hoping to do more Octane here pretty soon. You can subscribe to us on YouTube if you want to get more of these videos. We've got everything nicely organized in there under Brograph Talks and Brograph Tutorials and Brograph Experiments and whatever. We've also got our Octane stuff that's coming up. We're going to do in the same channel, but we're going to do a playlist that has stuff that's specifically Octane oriented. You can talk to us on Facebook, add us on Facebook, like us, or whatever that is, and contact us on Twitter. We'd love to see what you do with Cinema 4D and with these tutorials. Brograph.com has everything listed as well. And look for us on Reddit in the Cinema 4D subreddit. We're always on there talking to people. That's always fun. And you can get us in contact with us in all sorts of ways. So you can find us on the internet. Just Google us. And also AOL keyword Brograph. Until next time, I'm Dave Koss. Have a good one. Later, bros. It's pretty good, I guess.